on the China piece, I felt here for months and months, and feel that now, particularly in the wake of the phone call that Mr. Trump took from Taiwan President Tsai Ing-wen, that this is the state-to-state issue to watch. Mr. Trump feels that he can work a deal here transactionally, some way, somehow, by leveraging Taiwan. I think that's a huge mistake. The reason I think it's a mistake is that we need China's help with North Korea. North Korea is existential for us within the first term of Mr. Trump. And although there's a lot going on in China, as I said at the beginning, that it's cause for concern. The business issues there are extremely worrisome. The issue with China and their military venturism in the South China Sea will be coming face-to-face with Mr. Trump's desire to work against them on the issue of business and trade. So of all the issues that are out there, that's the one topic, Keith, that probably worries me the most.
We see him testing the media's waters on the bromance with Putin. We see him testing the waters with the tweet machine in China. What happens if he is tested? Do you think that North Korea could, and is, you talk about an important time with South Korea having these very obvious issues, do you think that there could be a surprise there where he actually has a test? I know a lot of some of our contacts who you obviously know quite well, those are most likely aligned with Mattis on this, or somewhat concerned about something happening in the Pacific. Is there anything there that you have on your radar?
Yes, no, absolutely. Both President Bush and President Obama, in the first year, or first 3 months in the case of Bush, first year in the case of Obama, confronted a Pacific crisis that required a White House and Defense State Department response that was very, very delicate. In the case of Bush, the U.S. reconnaissance aircraft, the spy plane that was bumped over Hainan Island. In the case of Obama, the U.S. survey vessel that, as we've already seen, Keith, that was already confronted just in the last 6 weeks by China. It was when the survey vessel was trying to recover this underwater unmanned vehicle, the UUV, and China grabbed it. Expect a test. Expect a testing by North Korea of their missiles, of an underground explosion sometime in the first quarter or so of Mr. Trump's stewardship, as we have seen him tweet and declare. If the North Koreans try additional long-range missile testing, Trump has said he's not going to allow that to happen. What does that mean? Will he preemptively go after a missile on its launch pad? The international scene this century and for many years prior to the year 2000 has seen challenges for new presidents, whether it's in the Straits of Hormuz, which is a second, in my judgment, likely area to test the resolve of the new president and his team, or in the Western Pacific, where I think that's the most likely area of confrontation. And I would say, Keith, beyond the issue of where it's going to be and what it might be, whether it's a test, an underground explosion, or an attempt to assert this 9 or 10 dash line territorial sovereignty in the South China Sea, almost as important as where and when is the kind of team that's in place to respond to it. And for those of us that are in this town and have been through transitions now for 30 or 40 years, what's remarkable about this transition is how few senior officials have even been named. I mean, just look at the slate of folks. There's not even a full cabinet yet named, as we don't have an agricultural secretary, but last I heard, the agricultural secretary doesn't sit in on the National Security Council meetings. But deputy secretaries of state and defense, undersecretaries of state and defense for policy, assistant secretaries of state and defense in these key areas for international security affairs have not been named. And so filling the team quickly with competent folks who are able to work the NSC system when a crisis emerges is as important, in my judgment, to consider in these coming weeks as the question of what might happen and where it might happen.
Just flipping a switch a little bit here, given your view that Trump, and I do appreciate the metaphor, it's not just a metaphor, it's a shining example of a difference between Eisenhower and JFK. If indeed you're right, and it is this, it's all about the U.S. interests and Americanism, one question I think leads to that, which is, if that's true, General, will the U.S. continue to fill the global leadership role, or will that start to slip away and fall into the hands of China's Xi Jinping?
Well, that is, in many respects, for those former members of the national security system and for the think tanks around Washington and New York, especially, that's the $64 question. What's the future of the U.S. global leadership here? And I think we've seen some answers to this already in Davos. I mean, just who would expect that the president of the People's Republic of China, Xi Jinping, would come across in Davos as a supporter of the global international order? I mean, that's something that the U.S. And NATO and the European Union and our key Asia-Pacific allies, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, they have been at the forefront of pushing a rules-based international order forged in the years after World War II. And the worrisome piece about what one reads from Mr. Trump is that the issue of America first, he really means. Again, I just urge folks to look at the convention acceptance speech in terms of how he views America's role, and that will be, that'll be the intellectual and policy $64 question. The comparison with Ike, I mean, Ike was such a revered retired five-star. Although Ike was a reluctant interventionist, he was not a unilateralist. Ike was, after all, the first supreme commander of NATO. He was very, very close to all of his World War II counterparts. He believed in the importance of rebuilding Europe and deepening alliances around the globe. And Ike worked very, very carefully to construct that model. Mr. Trump is not one that holds a romantic view about NATO and about NATO Europe, and certainly no romantic view about the European Union. I mean, it was shocking to hear what he said in the Bild and Times of London interview about the prospect of additional departures from the EU beyond the UK. So, Keith, it's one of those things that I mentioned at the beginning through the glass darkly here. One hopes that there'll be an assertion of U.S. global leadership. Okay, understand it's going to be interest-driven, not values-driven. We're not going to be hectoring foreign leaders about opening up to democratic opposition and freedom of the press and so on, as I mentioned there at the beginning. But there are shared interests that have aligned the U.S. and Western Europe and Japan, South Korea over the decades, over the generations, and it's that shared set of interests that one hopes Mr. Trump is willing to exert some energy to protect and to foster.